We got two more teams today chasing the Eagles. It is Dallas and Miami. Should be some fun conversation with those two teams. John McMullen covers the league nationally, GetMoreSports.com, and covers the Eagles locally for 97.3 ESPN.com. He appears via the Boardwalk Honda hotline here on the Sports Bash. John, how are things?
Things are going well, but the Eagles can't get here quick enough. We're losing Manny Machado, Kawhi Leonard. Now a rotational big man is going to Sacramento after he's going home.
Yeah, that Bielitsa news is very interesting. He signed. He tells the Sixers he's going to come play here. Then he says, "I'm going to stay in Europe. It's best for my family." And now it looks like the Kings.
Funny how that works.
Sacramento seems to be better for his family.
Maybe the Sixers do need a general manager after all, but it's disappointing. I mean, that part of it, obviously, he's just a role player, but he was set to be a pretty strong and important role player for this team. So,
well, this tweet just came out from international reporter David Pick, who says Bielitsa felt devalued at $4.4 million with Philadelphia. The Kings can throw him more cash than his Sixers deal. It is a financial decision after his team in Europe decided not to overload the roster, and CSKA have no interest at this time. So it looked like he felt he could go into a EuroLeague team. There was no place for him there.
Yeah, well, and obviously it's his right to change his mind before he signs a deal. So, but you rarely see this kind of thing happen. So,
yeah, this is bad form.
No, it's I don't know if you can blame the Sixers, but it certainly doesn't look good for them. But when somebody changes their mind, happened to the Eagles. Remember with Frank Gore a number of years ago. And people still cry about that. I mean, until you get pen to paper, anybody can change their mind at any time.
All right, John, let's take a look at some NFL news and notes before we get into our two teams today. Former Jet, Buck, Patriot, Chief, Darrelle Revis announced his retirement from the NFL. I don't know, one of, if not the best to ever do it?
Yeah, no doubt about it. Hall of Famer, one of the best lockdown corners this league has ever seen for a very long time. Revis Island, the nickname. For a while there, nobody threw his way. I think the past couple seasons, his last two seasons or so were not great, and people forget about how good he was in his prime. Ridiculously good. Yeah, he's an all-time great, and he's made more money than any corner in the history of this game, and he did it by a number of short-term deals until he finally got a big deal. And he kept betting on himself, and it worked out year after year.
Yeah, you know, he was a controversial guy, though. I mean, it wasn't like it always seemed to be something with him in the contract situations, but when he was a member of that, what was that, Patriots team. He was on the Patriots that won the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, and that's sort of, you see it, and I think this mentality's, and he's one of the guys who really started it, is that mentality of betting on yourself that Kirk Cousins did before he finally got the big deal this year. Le'Veon Bell's currently doing it. He was really the first. So you did hear about the contract every year because he kept signing one-year deals because he felt he was devalued. So he'd signed the one-year deal for big money, got another one-year deal for big money, and then he finally got the long-term deal he always wanted. So he's one of the reasons you see guys trying to take that route today.
Yeah, I would say even though he went to Pitt, I have to make him a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah, he is. Like I said, he's one of the best cover corners this league has ever seen. And remember the generation he's playing in where it's easier and easier to throw the football. And he still was able to be a consistent lockdown corner. There's no doubt he's one of the best to ever play the game.
He had the injury issues, and that kind of, because he's only 33 years old. I mean, I get 33 in today's world. You're starting to kind of turn it, but he hasn't really been a good player for, the last 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, and there's anytime you hit 30 in this league, people talk about it all the time. You start getting raised eyebrows. That's one of the reasons, as well as he's played over the last 2-3 years for the Eagles, they haven't hammered out an extension with Brandon Graham yet. People look at him and say he turned 30, and they start to wonder, well, when is the decline coming? That's just sort of the nature of what this league is. Now, there have been corners. Terrence Newman, perfect example, but he's a rare breed. He's 39. I think he might turn 40 this year, still playing at a relatively high level, but he's a sub-package player. And then you have Charles Woodson, for instance, who played so long, but he moved to safety, and that's generally what happens. Rod Woodson, same thing. Great corner for a long time, ultimately moves to safety. Who knows if Darrelle Revis could have done that? But when you make as much money, that's part of it too. When you make as much money as he has, there's not a desire for some people to keep going if you're starting to decline. And that might play into it as well.
Yeah, and he was a guy that, I don't want to say was in more about the money, but he certainly wasn't going to come play for the veterans minimum.
Well, that was the thing everybody was saying last year when he did sit out and he did come back. And who can get into his head? But, yeah, he's always been a great businessman, as I mentioned. And he's always been – I don't necessarily say about the money. I mean, he did go to New England for an opportunity to win. So it's not necessarily that. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. You can be a good businessman and still want to win. He was the best corner in the game for a very long period of time and wanted to be paid like it. I don't see much of an issue with that.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, covers the league nationally for GetMoreSports.com. We're counting down 2 teams every day chasing the Eagles Super Bowl trophy, and one of them today is the Miami Dolphins. You mentioned Frank Gore a minute ago. He is the running back in Miami. What's the running game look like in Miami? Because the quarterback play there has been a little sketchy at times. So what's the run game look like?
Well, Frank Gore's obviously brought in there to help. They've moved Jay Ajayi to get him out of the locker room. He's obviously in Philadelphia now. That worked out well for the Eagles. So now Frank Gore is down there, 14th year in this league, obviously has been a tremendous running back, borderline Hall of Famer, but he is 35 years old. So you have to put that into the equation. And then they have Kenyan Drake, who kind of took over last year once they moved Ajayi, former third-round pick from Alabama. And that'll be the 2 guys expected to hold down the fort and give some Ryan Tannehill some support. It certainly doesn't look devastating on paper, but a lot of what Adam Gase is trying to do down there is sort of addition by subtraction. He thought it was a bad locker room, and he's trying to shake it up.
John, let's talk about the quarterback situation, because obviously Tannehill has been hurt. He's supposedly coming back. Last year they had Jake Cutler, who's now a reality TV star. He's pretty good at it, actually.
He's tremendous. Much better reality TV star than quarterback.
Much more likable guy on that reality show.
He's I've been telling people for years, I told you that, he's got one of the best personalities. Nobody has known it. He's funny, but he just comes across for some reason on the football fan. I think it's, I made fun of that scout, unnamed scout, who said about Sam Darnold, bad face. I never heard that description before. But I think it should have been used for Jay Cutler because he's got that smirk.
The best,
and everybody thinks he doesn't care. he's one of the most entertaining people. That's why I thought he would have been great in the booth if he didn't come back. I thought he would have been like Tony Romo. It would have been great.
Why didn't he go? Why did he not want it? Like, did Fox just pivot and decide they didn't want it? Like, I figured already played last year. Did Fox feel burned?
Probably felt a little bit burned. They gave him the job, and he decided to come back because he felt like he wanted to continue playing. Got an opportunity to be a starter again, and then when you go into it again, maybe it was that feeling of being burned. But ultimately, I think he will be on TV. Time heals all wounds, maybe not with Fox, maybe with another network, and I think he'll ultimately be really, really good at it.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the reality show, it is his wife, Kristen Cavallari, is that I think her name, and she's starting a business.
Cavallari.
Yeah, she's starting a business. And Cutler is now retired, and she's looking for his support. She says, well, what's on your agenda today? And he says, well, I got to get first in line. I got to pick up the boys at school. Got to get there at 2:30. He comes home. He says, did you know I got there at 2:30, and I was like 10th in line?
Yeah, and it's as I said, he's a very entertaining guy. His favorite line, I think, is, now that I'm retired, I'm not looking to do a whole heck of a lot or something of that nature.
Right.
And his wife is not hard on the eyes as well.
No. And she was a reality star herself. But what is the quarterback situation? I mean, this team last year, they had made the playoffs the year before. Tannehill gets hurt. They go to Cutler, and they had all sorts of problems last year. Is this Tannehill jumping back in and, hey, this team's ready to get back into playoff mode because he's back?
No, I mean, I don't think so. You've got a pretty large sample size of Ryan Tannehill. He's under 500 in his career as a starting quarterback in this league. I think he is what he is at this point, and that's pretty average. It's abundantly clear that Adam Gase, when he came in, wasn't completely sold on him. And I think that continues, but they haven't been able to get a replacement yet. The backups are guys like Brock Osweiler and Bryce Petty, so he doesn't have to worry about losing his job. But no, I don't think Ryan Tannehill automatically puts the Dolphins into the playoff conversation.
He doesn't have much to throw to. I mean, they brought Amendola in, Devontae Parker. They drafted, Carew, who had a decent season, the Rutgers kid. But it doesn't seem like there's a whole we looked at the back. There's a whole lot of weapons on this team, period.
Well, remember, Jarvis Landry's another guy who's gone. So they obviously productive mostly out of the slot. Kenny Stills is a pretty good deep threat. And Amendola is a proven slot receiver as well. So it's not a bad group. Devontae Parker's got a ton of talent, former first-round pick. He's never really lived up to his potential, though, but you could see him breaking out eventually. I wouldn't say it's a terrible group. I have more. I'll say this: I have more questions about the guys throwing the football than the guys catching the football.
And Mike Gesicki, the tight end there. They've got Fasano, Escobar, and Gesicki, a guy from the area that they drafted. So it'll be interesting to see how they fit him in, a very intriguing offensive prospect.
Yeah, he's a tremendous athlete, sort of a new age tight end, one of those guys who's a detached, glorified receiver, 6'6", doesn't block all that much, hasn't been asked to block all that much, but those guys are becoming rare in the NFL, and guys like Gesicki is what everybody's looking for. So, he's got a lot of potential to develop into one of those very good pass-catching detached tight ends.
All right, let's look to the defensive side of the ball for this team because, it's not the no-name defense, but it's pretty close.
Not a ton of names you'd recognize. Cameron Wake would probably be the most obvious. Kiko Alonso, for people locally, is still there as one of their starting linebackers.
And by the way, that Kiko Alonso is not that bad of a player.
No, he's not. He's not a bad player. I think the issue here was he was coming off the injury. Remember, he wasn't completely healthy. He got hurt again, tried to play through it. So on one hand, you give him credit for trying to plow through what was a pretty serious injury, but it affected him on the field, and people who watched him play say he's terrible. But the reality is he was a pretty good linebacker in Buffalo. Now that he's healthy again, he's an okay linebacker, at least in Miami. He's certainly a starter. And then their first-round pick, Minkah Fitzpatrick, so a ton of talent there at safety. Rashad Jones as well. So potentially they could have one of the top safety duos in football. Might take a year or two. But overall, yeah, it's Cameron Wake and a bunch of guys you've barely heard of.
Yeah, and our buddy Nate Allen is playing on that team too as well. So the Dolphins, a team that did not make the playoffs a year ago. Let's transition over to a team that did not make the playoffs either, and that is the Dallas Cowboys, John. And obviously here, one of the more heated rivalries in the NFC East, the Eagles and the Cowboys. And the Cowboys, they've got some interesting storylines. They lost Ezekiel Elliott for 6 games last year. He is back. What does that do to change the Dallas Cowboys?
Well, it does a whole heck of a lot. I mean, he is the center of the Cowboys universe. He is one of the best running backs in football. When he's on the field, they're much tougher to beat. That's evident. They really, really struggled last season without him. But I'll tell you what, if you look at their receiving situation and who they have outside the numbers, he's going to be in Adrian Peterson territory. He's going to be seeing a lot of 8-man fronts. And people are going to say, Dak Prescott beat me throwing the football to Allen Hurns and Terrence Williams and Jeff Swain and people like that. And so I think the issue is, can a guy like Dak Prescott take advantage of all the attention Ezekiel Elliott is going to get?
Yeah, more because Elliott was out last year, or Prescott not as good as we thought?
Well, those two things go hand in hand. I think Prescott was so good as a rookie because Elliott dominated, and he was in great situations all the time. When he was not in great situations, he's an average to below average quarterback. However, when you have him on the field, Ezekiel Elliott I'm talking about, in theory, Dak Prescott will be put in better situations. And when he's put in those kinds of situations, he's proven he's able to do some things. So everything on that offense hinges on Ezekiel Elliott. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that.
Their receiving core, obviously they lost Dez Bryant. Cole Beasley's still there. Allen Hurns, Terrence Williams. They've got Tavon Austin. Witten retired, so the tight end spot will be interesting. Does Prescott have playmakers to help him out if Elliott gets the box stacked up against him?
Well, I don't know, but I will say this. People immediately, and we've talked about this a number of times, Mike, will say people look at them losing Dez Bryant, who's still not employed, and they'll say, well, they don't have anybody. I just mentioned the names, Allen Hurns, Terrence Williams. They don't have anybody. Michael Gallup, a rookie. But in theory, Dez was bad. So those guys aren't going to be worse than him. They might not have the name. But especially Hurns, if he's able to stay healthy, at this stage of his career, he's a better receiver, strange as that sounds. Now, Jason Witten, we just talked about a first-ballot Hall of Famer, Darrelle Revis. First-ballot Hall of Famer Jason Witten, but he was an aging tight end, a slow tight end, still had the tremendous hands, still had the savvy. But in theory, you could get better athletically. I don't know if Rico Gathers can turn into anything, or Dalton Schultz, the rookie, or Swain, but they should be faster. So while it doesn't look great on paper, maybe it ends up being a little bit better. I think the story is, can those guys get out? They're not going to see a lot of, cover 3 with Ezekiel Elliott in the backfield and the reputation they have. So they should have opportunities. They should see plenty of man coverage. The question is, can they do anything with it?
Frederick, Looney, Martin, Smith, Collins. Everybody always talks that the Cowboys have, if not the best, one of the best offensive lines in football. I always had felt it was a little overrated. What is your take on the Cowboy offensive line?
No, I think it's right there with the Eagles. I think this division, I think it's 1-2. If it's not the Eagles, it's the Cowboys. I think it's still the best offensive line. Now, Teron Smith has got to be out there. Last year, he struggled with the back injury, but I've talked to enough people in this league. Everson Griffin, who's one of the best pass-rushing defensive ends, asked him who the best left tackle is. Everybody says Teron Smith. He's dominant when he's out there, when he's healthy. There's no question Zach Martin's the best guard in this league, and Travis Frederick is a top 5 center. So right there, that's pretty good. Now, La'el Collins has plenty of talent, and I think Connor Williams, who's a rookie second-round pick, I think he's the key, whether it's going to be the best offensive line or top 5. I think if he's able to step in and play at a decent level, not even a great level, just a competent level to add to those 4 guys, I think you've got the best offensive line in football.
Interesting. All right. For years, we always say, man, their defense doesn't scare me at all. But for some reason, they've performed. Is this defense better than some of those teams that we kept asking questions about in the past? I mean, they've added a lot of pieces. They have Lee. They got DeMarcus Lawrence possibly finally for, a full season. This is a team that the names never seem to jump off the page. But is this a good defense?
It is. A lot of it in the past, you mentioned that some was always greater than the parts is because of Rod Marinelli, but they've slowly added talent. I remember a couple years ago, they had nothing on the defensive line. Now, all of a sudden, DeMarcus Lawrence has turned into a player in one of the best pass rushers in this league. David Irving, when he's on the field and not suspended, has been difficult to deal with. Tyrone Crawford's not a bad player. Malik Collins has got some talent. Now Randy Gregory, we talked about him yesterday, he's reinstated. Much more talent on the defensive line. Everybody knows how good Sean Lee is when he's on the field. Injury issues are always the problem with him. As Jalen Smith gets farther away from that horrible injury he had at Notre Dame, he gets better and better. He was a top 5 talent before that injury. And then you bring in Leighton Vander Esch, who's a player the Eagles had their eyes on in the draft. All of a sudden, that linebacker position is looking pretty good. And then in the defensive backfield, the names don't jump out at you, but Byron Jones, tremendous athlete, and Xavier Woods as well. Those 2 players, I think, are solid. And you kind of move on from there. I think it's a better group than it has been, and probably their best defense, at least on paper, over the last 5 years.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, here on the Sports Bash. We counted down the 10 worst Philly seasons since 1990. Only 2 Eagles seasons made the list, John. The 98 Ray Rhodes team at 3-13, and the 2012 Andy Reid team at 4-12. So Eagles have been pretty good over the last 30 years.
Yeah, they have been, and a lot of it was the Andy Reid era where they were consistently good for a long time. And even early in the Chip Kelly, which was a very small era, people kind of forget because it ended so poorly, but they were a decent, certainly above average team. And they have been. One of the issues was Jeffrey Lurie's, I don't know how many years it is now, he finally went sort of rubber stamped the gold standard comment. I think that kind of, people could never let go of that and never give that regime, that Andy Reid regime, the credit it deserved. I mean, that was, they weren't the gold standard, but they were the silver standard. A lot of people wanted to emulate what the Eagles had built as far as an organizational structure. And I think if you look at all the assistant coaches in Andy Reid's coaching tree, I think you can see the respect the rest of the league had for that organization.
All right, two more teams left in the countdown of teams chasing the Eagles. Actually, just one. It's the Patriots. We will look at them on tomorrow's show here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Teams chasing the Eagles. The Patriots are the last team we will look at. If you miss any of our teams in the countdown over the last 3 weeks, go to our YouTube channel, 97.3 ESPN on YouTube, and go find your favorite team. We've counted them all down. The Patriots are tomorrow, and then on Friday we will preview Eagles training camp, which will open up next week, and we will have you covered from top to bottom here on your home for the Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. John?
And real quick, Mike, all the position groups are already up for you at 973ESPN.com. So all the training camp positional capsules are already up.
Yes, we will be breaking them down next week. We will preview all of John's position previews. They're at 973ESPN.com. Follow him on Twitter at JF McMullen. We're looking forward to it, man.
All right, thanks, Mike.